We've spent quite a number of weeks exploring different elements of Shabbat. Next week will be our concluding class, and we will be exploring the conclusion, the end of the Shabbat, the transition into the new week, which takes place through the Havdalah ceremony. And tonight we are going to be examining some of the prayers of the Shabbat that we do, which mostly are quite famous and well known to us. And hopefully we can learn some important lessons that are relevant, especially in our time right now. So I'm going to start by asking you a question, which I think will be a good follow-up to really what we were just discussing and to the situation that we're all in right now. And the question is being alone a good thing or not a good thing? And obviously, if you can explain to me or justify why you think one way or the other. So if any of you would like to share your thoughts, if aloneness or being alone is something inherently good or bad, desirable, undesirable, what are your thoughts? I'd love to hear.
So it's a hard question, but of course, in order to it's hard, but you have to know how to be alone, and you have to when you're always in a need for someone, you never be happy as you can be when you accept the life being alone. Because when you love yourself enough to be alone, and you don't need the support from other, like that you're good enough and you cook good, or like all these that people tell you, if you know to appreciate yourself and to be alone, then you will be more relaxed in life and accept others. So of course you need easy, it's not.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's really, really important what you said. You have to know how to be alone. So, it sounds like there's different ways to be alone. So it could be good or bad, but it's needed. So I think you explained it very nicely. Any other thoughts? Hang on, let me unmute you, Betsy. I'm not sure I'm able to unmute you. I think you need to allow yourself to be unmuted. Okay, go ahead. I think I can hear you now.
Well, it kind of depends on whether, there's a lot of geniuses who always like to be alone and compose, but I like the sense of being with a lot of people or friends and mitzvahs, and I don't, and I'm a grandmother, so I have kids and grandchildren, but I like to have people around me. I love the interest. I love the energy.
Yeah, we definitely get a lot
losing it during this period. So especially, that's a very good question,
right.
And a very good answer. But I think that is one thing that money can't buy, that we yearn for right now in these times.
Yeah.
Yes, I want to say something, because I always love to have guests, to be with people, and I felt that I don't know how to explain it, but I still do, but now I need more. You hear me good?
Yeah, I can hear
Like, but after a while, I understand that it's I look around too much. Like I still love people and to be with, but I felt after a while that it's so hard for me to be by myself, and my head is not stop thinking and need always like something to do. So I understand that I needed like to know how to be alone too. So
you. Right.
it's not right or another, because I still a different person when I'm with people, and I'm happy, and but it's so like when we got married, when I got married, we moved to Cyprus, and we living in Cyprus. We have no friend, and after living in Tel Aviv with all people, to be
Right.
alone, it was so hard to
Right.
be
Wow.
able to relax and to be alone and to accept it. So it really showed me other way of being, and that's also important, but it's not saying that I don't like to be with people, a lot of people.
Right. Right. Yeah, of course we're not gonna, God didn't create us to be alone. And actually it says right at the beginning of the Torah, God himself says after he created man, it's not good for man to be alone. That's literally what it says in the verse. But obviously, like you've mentioned, there's definitely a place for it. So we're gonna delve into this idea a bit more. It's not black and white. It's a bit complex. So I'm gonna start with a story that took place in a synagogue. I believe it was in Jerusalem. I'm not 100% sure though. And it was Friday night, and the services had concluded, and there was one man who was getting ready to leave the synagogue and head home to join his family for the Friday night Shabbat meal. And as he's about to walk out, he suddenly decides, you know what, let me look around and see if there's somebody here who might look like they need an invitation. And as he's noticing the people leaving the synagogue, his eyes fall upon one young man who's standing there with a backpack on his back. And he kind of seems like he's on his own, a little bit shy, a little bit unsure. So this individual goes over to this young man and he says, would you like to join my family for the Shabbat dinner? So this young man, looking very relieved with a shy smile, he says, yes, I would love that, of course. And together they walk back to the host's home. As they arrive home and the family greets them, the table is beautifully set with the candles and the dishes and the food. And of course, they begin with the traditional Shalom Aleichem song, which is sung at the beginning before Kiddush. And the host notices that this young guest is not joining in with the singing, and he's a little surprised, but of course he makes no mention of it, and he just does what he can as much as possible to make his guest feel comfortable. Anyway, they go through the kiddush, the hand washing, the challah, and as they're sitting at the table, the host notices the young man picking up the songbook and looking through the pages. So the host says, is there something that you are looking to sing? So the young man says, yes, in fact, there was a song that was sung when we were still at the synagogue, and I would really love to sing it. It's something Dodi. So the host says, oh, yes, that's the Lecha Dodi. And of course, he's thinking in his mind, we don't really sing that at the Friday night meal. That's part of the prayer in the synagogue. But of course, he wants to make his guests comfortable. And he says, okay, let's sing the song. And everybody together sings the song Lecha Dodi. They go through the fish course and they come to the soup. And again, the young man asks if they can sing the Lecha Dodi once again. And the host is a bit surprised, but of course, it's not really such a big deal. Why not? Let's sing the song again. And this repeats itself a few times over the course of the meal. So of course, the host is finding this quite unusual, and he's wondering about this young man. and where he's from and why he is so taken by the Lecha Dodi song. The meal comes to a close, and the host tries to grab a few quiet moments with his young guest. And he says, I didn't have a chance to ask you your name, where you're from. So the young man, again, he's seeming very shy, very nervous. He says, I'm from Ramallah. So the host says, Ramallah? And then he realizes, oh, of course, Ramla, right? Ramallah is the Arab town in the West Bank, but Ramla is an Israeli town. So the host says, oh, Ramla, yes, I have a cousin in Ramla. His name is Danny so-and-so. Do you know him? So the young man smiles nervously. He says, no, there are no Jews in Ramallah. So the host is very taken aback, and he's really not sure what's going on. Who's this guest that he brought in with him? And he says, what's your name? And the young man says, my name is Mahmoud. The host is completely speechless. He doesn't even know, have I brought home an Arab? Who is this? Why is he interested in the Shabbat meal? What's going on? Anyway, the young man quickly jumps in and says, actually, I'm Jewish. Let me tell you my story. So he was born in Ramallah. He was raised as an Arab in an Arab family. And of course, he was taught to hate. He describes how he was taught to hate the Jewish people. And he said as he was growing up, he started to think a little bit more and, say that, well, Jews are also people. We were taught that we're supposed to be kind to other people. Why are we supposed to hate the Jews so much? And he started to have these questions, and he verbalized them to his father. When his father heard these questions, he became furious and threw his son out of the house, just like that, with nothing. So this young man, he's been thrown out of his home. He's got to find another place to go. But before he leaves to his next destination, he sneaks into his home during the night just to pack together a few belongings to take along with him. And as he sneaks into the house, his mother finds him. And she says, she's looking pale and nervous. And she says, what are you doing? Where are you going? So he says, I have all these questions about the Jews. I'm trying to understand all these things that we've been taught. I think I'm going to go visit the Jews. I'm going to go live with them, learn about them a little bit. Maybe I'll even convert. So his mother's looking more pale by the moment. And she says, actually, you don't need to convert because I am Jewish. And according to Jewish law, Jewishness comes from the mother, and since I'm Jewish, you are also Jewish. So this young man is stunned, and his mother says, yes, I married an Arab. It was a big mistake, but through you, I will be redeemed, she said to him. And she gave him her Israeli ID and his birth certificate, a few documents to help him when he gets to Israel, to be able to prove who he is. And then as he's about to leave, she says to him, I actually have a picture of my family who went to find the grave of one of our ancestors from many, many years ago. Maybe I'll give it to you. And she hands him a photo. So, of course, the host is listening to this story, and he is fascinated and very intrigued. And now he understands why the young man seemed very unfamiliar with everything that was going on at the meal. And he says to him, is it possible, do you have the picture of that grandfather's grave? So the young man was very excited, and he says, yes, I carry it with me wherever I go. And he pulls out the picture. And the host takes him, has a close look at it. He sees a Jewish family standing next to a tombstone on which is engraved the name Rabbi Shlomo Halevi Alkabetz. And now he is again completely and totally stunned, because Rabbi Shlomo Alkabetz is the one who authored the prayer of Lecha Dodi, which is the song that this young man was so taken by and wanted to hear sung again and again. And of course, this young man had no idea who Rabbi Shlomo Alkabetz was and that he had authored this song. So this is a very beautiful, mystical poem, if you like. It's actually an acrostic. If you look in the prayer book, you'll see that the first letters of each paragraph, each stanza, are larger, and it spells out the name Shlomo Halevi. Shlomo, the son, it spells out his name, the author's name. And the words Lecha Dodi Likrat Kala, come my beloved, come my bride. That's the way that we welcome in the Shabbat, and that's the way that it has been welcomed for hundreds of years. And actually, the Talmud describes how the sages would dress in their finest clothes on Friday afternoon and go out and welcome the Shabbat bride. And particularly well known are the mystics and the sages from the mystical city of Safed, in the north of Israel, who would go out to the field and sing Lecha Dodi and welcome the Shabbat bride on Friday night, the start of the Shabbat. I actually had the wonderful opportunity to study in the city of Tzfat for 2 years after I was in high school. And on Friday nights, sometimes we weren't actually located in the old city of Tzfat. We weren't very far. We were a bit up the mountain. But sometimes Friday night we would go down to the old city, and there's lots of, the synagogues there. There's still some of the original synagogues of the mystics, like the Arizal and others. And you hear as you walk through the streets, you can hear the singing from the different synagogues. And there's this beautiful view over the mountain, and you really get the feeling of this kind of spiritual transcendent atmosphere, which was obviously very conducive and appropriate for these great mystics and Kabbalists who learned and studied and taught there. And there's a lot of deep meaning in the different lines of this particular prayer. Now, once we've welcomed the Shabbat bride, and Shabbat has begun. So after the prayers, everybody goes home, right? And we have the continuation of the celebration with the meal. Now, what happens when we arrive home? We actually come home with 2 angels escorting us into our homes. We have the good angel and we have the so-called bad angel. And the Talmud tells us that when the angels come with us, they are coming to inspect. They're coming to see, does our home look like it's ready and waiting for Shabbat? Is there a set table? Are there candles burning? Have we prepared? And if that is the case, then the good angel proclaims a blessing, and the other angel is forced. The blessing that the good angel says is, may it be like this again in the next week, the next Shabbat. And the other angel is forced to say amen to his blessing. Now, of course, even the bad angel is hoping to see that we will be very well prepared for Shabbat. The bad angel is only doing the bidding of its creator. And it doesn't have a personal desire in either direction. But the angel is also, even though it's a bad angel, it is a messenger of God and wants us to do what we are supposed to be doing. However, if the angels arrive home with us and see that the house is dark and it's not ready for Shabbat, then the angel says, may it be like this again next week, and the good angel is forced to say amen. So what do we do upon the arrival home? We sing the well-known song, Shalom Aleichem. And this song is welcoming these angels that have come with us. Now, if we actually go through the different stanzas, so in the beginning, we're saying, welcome, come inside, bless us. And then the final stanza is, Se'etchem l'shalom, please leave. Which really is very strange. We just welcome the angels with such ceremony and pomp and drama and singing. And before they can even come in and enjoy the Kiddush with us, we are already asking them to leave. Why would we do something like that? Why would we not invite them to stay? So we're going to get the answer to this interesting question from a story that takes place in the Torah. We're actually going to read about it in next week's Torah portion. And it's the story of Jacob running away from the home of his father-in-law. Okay, this week in the Torah portion, Jacob leaves his own home and he ends up going to his father-in-law, where he gets married and has children, and he works for his father-in-law for many years. And after being swindled by his father-in-law on numerous occasions, and now that he has a large family, it's time for him to return back to the land of Israel. But his father-in-law wasn't going to let him leave so easily, and he had to sort of steal away. Now what happens as he's traveling back, he gets wind of the fact that his brother, Esav, is traveling towards him, getting ready to confront him, and with the desire to actually kill him. Esav is still very angry that Jacob took the blessings from him. Jacob got the blessings from their father instead of him. And from then, Esav was determined to get revenge. And that was actually the reason why Yaakov left his home and ran away. And now that he's coming back after 22 years, Esav's anger is still very strong, and he is not about to give up his promise of revenge. So they haven't met up yet. Jacob is traveling towards the land of Israel, and they cross over a little river, and he has to bring over his family and livestock and possessions, and finally everything has been brought over this river. And Jacob suddenly realizes that a few little jugs have remained behind. So he leaves the entire encampment of his family, which numbered quite a large group, together with all their possessions and livestock. And he goes back alone to the other side of the river to collect these small few items. There's actually very meaningful Kabbalistic explanation for why he found it so important to return for what seemed just like very simple and unimportant jugs. But we will not be able to go into that explanation tonight. Tonight we're going to focus on a different part of the story. What happens when he arrives to the other side? He meets up with a man. This man was actually an angel representing the angel of his brother Esav, the spiritual force of his brother Esav, and they wrestled all night. Now, obviously, although it's described as a physical altercation and fight, it's actually a struggle which has much deeper meaning and symbolism. It was a struggle for who would dominate, who would be the stronger one morally in the time to come and in the future. Now, what's very significant about this story is that when Jacob came over the other side of the river, he was alone. And that's when he ended up having this very important, pivotal struggle with the angel. He was alone. Now, yes, he was the father of the house and the head of the household, but his children were not little, and they weren't little young children. He could have had help from the older ones, but nevertheless, he did go alone. And we're going to zoom in on that by looking at a different incident that took place with Jacob. At the beginning of this journey, when he left his home to go to the land of Haran. Okay, so we started by talking about his return from his uncle's house to the land of Israel. And now we're backtracking to 22 years earlier when he left his home and he was headed as a young, well, he wasn't that young, but as a single unmarried man to his uncle's house in the land of Haran. And there again, we have a story where he's traveling, and as travelers do, they get weary, they get tired, and it was time for him to go to sleep. And he found somewhere to lay his head, and as he lay down and fell asleep, he has a dream with a ladder, and in the dream, the angels are climbing up the ladder and then down the ladder. So again, we have Jacob and we have him having some encounter with angels, with malachim. What else happens at the time of that dream? At the time of that dream, God speaks to Jacob. Now, it's explained that when did God speak to Jacob? Not while the angels were there. The angels that were, what was happening? Jacob was a very righteous man, and he had with him an escort, an accompaniment of angels protecting him as he traveled. As he left the land of Israel, the angels of the land of Israel were leaving his presence, and he was going to have a new entourage of angels to accompany him out of the land of Israel. So the first group of angels ascended, they went up the ladder, and before the second group of angels came down, Jacob was alone. And that is when God came and spoke to him and gave him a very meaningful promise that even though he's going into exile, he's going into a place of darkness, the place of Haran, which is known to be an immoral place. His uncle was a swindler, a liar, a cheater, and he would face tremendous challenges over there. And God was promising him that he would be with him and he would be successful, and ultimately he would return. So the holiest moment when Jacob encounters God is when he is alone. So while angels are very holy and very spiritual, the climax, the ultimate, the peak of holiness, when we can actually unite and be one with God, takes place in a private moment, at a time when nothing else is there, even other spiritual, lofty beings such as angels. If we want to go to a holy time, obviously when we think of a day that's the holiest day of the year, we all think about Yom Kippur, right? There's only one day of Yom Kippur, Achat Bashana, one day that is holy like that in the year. And on that day is the only day in the entire year that the high priest was allowed to enter the Holy of Holies, to do a very special and important service. Again, he went alone. There was nobody who accompanied him. The service that he did took place on behalf of the Jewish people in complete and utter privacy. What's the word that's used to describe the Holy of Holies? What's the Hebrew word? It's called Kodesh HaKadashim. Okay, the word Kodesh, holy, which is also how we speak about Shabbat, Shabbat Kodesh, has the same root as the word Kiddushin. Kiddushin is used in the context of marriage. When we talk about betrothal and marriage in Jewish law, it's referred to as Kiddushin. What happens after a couple get married? So obviously we all know about the chuppah that takes place, the wedding ceremony with all the different, with the veiling, with the ring, with all the blessings. But after the chuppah is over and the couple leave the chuppah, there's another step which is part of the marriage process, and that is called yichud. The couple enters a room together and they lock themselves in the room because they need to be, as a newly married couple, they need to spend time alone, privately. That's between the chuppah, and then after that, the wedding, the dinner and dancing celebration continues after that. So that's another type of being alone. There's being alone, just you alone by yourself, but there's also being alone, united. Husband and wife, man or woman and God. It's a different type of aloneness, but it's also a very important and very spiritual and special one. If we want to extend this a little bit and talk about our homes, so the home is a miniature temple. What takes place in the temple is reflected and mirrored in the home. And in fact, today, more so because we don't actually have a physical temple in Jerusalem. All the things we spoke about in previous weeks about the food and the meal and the dinner, describing how we utilize them for holy purposes. So when we do so, our table mirrors the altar. It parallels the altar, the mizbeach that was in the holy temple. Which part of our homes reflects the Kodesh HaKodeshim, the Holy of Holies? That part of the home is actually in the bedroom. It is called the inner sanctum, the Holy of Holies. That is where a married couple is able to reach the ultimate level of holiness that God has made possible for them to reach. When a husband and wife unite as a married couple, they're able to transcend and achieve a holiness in a way unlike anything else that they can do in other parts of their relationship. So again, this aloneness, it takes place in a private time, in a private space with nobody else there. And that's what happens between us and God on the Shabbat. So whilst we are very happy and excited and appreciate and recognize that when the angels are escorting us, this is something very spiritual and very tremendous. It comes to a certain point where we say, thank you so much. You've graced us with your blessings and your holiness, but please, now we would like to be alone, just us and God. And in fact, the Eshet Chayil follows a similar theme. The Eshet Chayil, when we sing the special song to the woman of valor, obviously there are many different ways to explain, many layers and many angles. On a most basic level, of course, it is a very beautiful and wonderful special song to the woman of the house. But there's also deeper, more Kabbalistic and mystical understandings of this song that we sing. And one of them is that the Eshet Chayil is referring again to the Shabbat, because the Shabbat is the bride, and she is she's being praised and recognized and welcomed. And who is the mate of the Shabbat bride? It is actually us, the Jewish people. So it's very interesting because sometimes, or many times, the Jewish people are compared to and described as the bride, with, let's say, God as the husband or the groom. But there are also times where the Jewish people, such as this time, we have the Shabbat as the bride and the Jewish people as the groom. So there's ways that we can utilize each of these elements in the service of God, right? We're not necessarily only restricted to one way of serving God. There's different elements, and there's a time and place for each one. So I think these ideas about the holiness, the potential, the intensity and the power of being alone is especially meaningful now when many of us, most of us are facing this reality of being more alone than we've probably ever been, and not in a way that we've chosen to be. And again, alone doesn't necessarily have to mean just you on your own and nobody else for miles around. It could be that. It definitely could be that. But it could also be you alone with whomever is in your household right now at the moment, right? The way that we've had to spend time with our household members over the past many months, we've never been put in that kind of situation ever. Of course, we've always wanted to spend quality time together and hopefully try to do so as much as possible, but the nature of it is completely different. It's kind of, it forces us to look very, look in a different way at those people that we are with, that we are living with. And yes, it is difficult, and certain times are more difficult than others, especially those times when we're used to being with more of a crowd or our extended family and our friends. It kind of glares us much more in the face that we're alone and we're isolated. And why are we alone? And we wish it didn't have to be this way. And of course, we can and should still wish for all of that. There is so much that we gain from being able to be with others. We gain from the people that we interact with, and they gain from us as well. But while we are in this situation, it's an opportunity for us to realize the power, the opportunity that lies in this aloneness. I mentioned in some of the classes about how on Shabbat we try to elevate all parts of our regular way of functioning. So we discussed the food and the meal and the meaning. We discussed how we try to spend more time with family, how perhaps we take the opportunity to have more meaningful conversations. And I did mention as well, speaking about the Torah portion, I believe. And I just want to, I didn't really explain that very much, and I want to take the opportunity to talk about it tonight. In the Torah, we have the 5 books of Moses, but each of the 5 books is divided into a number of portions. So altogether, the 5 books have 54 portions. Each week, we read one of those portions, sometimes depending on the length of the year, because the Jewish year goes according to the moon, but it's also adjusted based on the season. So sometimes there's a few more weeks or a few less weeks. Sometimes we have to read 2 portions, during certain weeks. So mostly it's 1 portion, sometimes it will be 2. And over the course of an entire year, we make our way through the entire Torah. And then after Sukkot, we celebrate Simchat Torah. We rejoice with the Torah. That's when we conclude. And of course, we start again. Now, we know many of the stories that are written in the Torah. And we know that there's a lot of history in the Torah as well, and a lot of laws in the Torah. Some which might not be relevant in today's day and age, because either we don't own animals, or because there are many laws associated with the temple which we don't keep right now. But there's something important that we need to understand about the weekly Torah portion. The Lubavitcher Rebbe pointed out that the word Torah is related to the word hora'ah, like hora'ah lema'aseh. Hora'ah lema'aseh means practical application. The Torah is not just something that took place or that was given all those thousands of years ago. There's 5 basic layers in learning and understanding the Torah. And aside from the basic simple interpretation of the verses, there are many teachings and deeper meanings which have direct relevance to what we are experiencing today, even though obviously the times that we live in are so completely different. There was another thing that the Rebbe focused on, which was a saying from the Alter Rebbe, who was the first one of the 7 of the chain of the 7 Chabad leaders. And that was, we must live with the times. Now, living with the times sounds like a very current thing to say, let's keep up with what's going on, with the things out there in the world, with the current trends. But of course, the Alter Rebbe was teaching us something about the Torah. And when he said that phrase, his students were all puzzled and they were trying to understand, what does that mean? Now, the Alter Rebbe tended to be more succinct in his teachings. He taught in short phrases or bursts, and it was left to his son did a lot of the explaining and elaborating. This particular teaching was elaborated on by his brother. What does it mean to live with the times? He explained that living with the times means living with the Torah portion of the week. Just as God makes everything happen in a certain way, God also makes the time, the calendar, the date fall out in a certain way. And when there's a particular Torah portion related to a particular week or a particular time of the year, that's because we are supposed to look into that portion and find something that we can live with in our day-to-day lives during that particular week. And what I find to be very helpful is that obviously there are so many important ideas, so many parts of our lives, so many values and principles that need discussion, they need focus. We'd like to work on them, we'd like to incorporate them, struggles, conflicts that we have, and we don't always know, what should I focus on right now? But if we have something like the weekly Torah portion, it gives us a chance to look into that portion and say, this week, I'm going to focus on the messages of this week's Torah portion and what they have to say about my daily life. It's actually a story told by the previous Rebbe, the 6th one in the line of Chabad Rebbeim, who describes how he once walked into his father's study, and his father, who was also one of the leaders of Chabad, looked very elated, and he also had tears in his eyes. And the previous Rebbe was a young boy of 11, and he was very perplexed at this elation mixed with tears. And he respected his father very much. His father was a very holy man, and he was a bit unsure about asking him his question. But over the course of the Shabbat, his father encouraged him, and the previous Rebbe asked, "Why did I see you in that state?" And his father, the 5th Lubavitcher Rebbe, the Rebbe Rashab, explained to him that, as the Alter Rebbe said, we are supposed to live with the times. The Torah portion is supposed to come alive for us and affect us. This week is the portion of Lech Lecha. The first week was Bereshit, which is where Adam and Eve sin. The second week is Noach, which is the flood, which is also negative. But this week of Lech Lecha, we live every single day with Abraham. It's all about Abraham and all the wonderful things that he did. And that was the cause of my elation, because I was at that time studying the Torah portion. So what I would like to point out is that the message that we learned from Jacob about the heights he was able to reach and the intensity of his connection with God, even at a time when he struggled, was at those times that he was alone, comes from the portions that we're reading this week and next week, which, as we explained, have very great relevance to the real-time things that we're living through right now. So there really is ways of connecting to the portion of the week. Each week there's more, there can be more than one message, and it's possible to find something that resonates with you. If you're interested in reading up more about this or learning more about this, you can go to Chabad.org, and every week they have articles, insights, teachings on many different, right from beginner, the basic story of the Torah portion, through more advanced, deeper understandings. So if this is something that interests you, you can feel free to look over there and see if there's something that that you can connect with. So while Shabbat is a day of rest, we take a step back. We don't do work. We don't create and engage with the world. There is still that inner work, that spiritual work that we are able to do, and we should do. We should take the chance to enrich ourselves spiritually when we don't have the distractions from the outside. We're much more with ourselves. That's the chance we have to look inward and to focus what's deep inside of us, that place, that deepest part of us where we know ourselves, and that even people who are closest to us can't necessarily reach. To end off this class, I'd just like to share a short video with you, which I think brings out some of what we've been talking about. So let me just share my screen. Okay. Will you please just give me a thumbs up if you can hear?
There ain't no synagogues on Mars.
Okay, so let me just make it louder. And we'll go.
There ain't no synagogues on Mars, nor Shabbat candles on the moon. But one remarkable individual got pretty close.
Booster ignition and liftoff of Space Shuttle Columbia with a multitude of national and international space research experiments.
Ilan Ramon was a second-generation Holocaust survivor. His mother survived Auschwitz, where countless Jews rose through the chimneys of the crematorium. Never again became a slogan that Ilan personally turned into reality. Iraqi dictator Saddam Hussein vowed repeatedly to incinerate the state of Israel. In 1979, he began rapid construction on a nuclear reactor. Ilan joined a brave team of Israeli Air Force pilots who led an impossibly dangerous raid that incapacitated Saddam's reactor. But for a man with Ilan's ambition, even the sky is not the limit.
Finally, I want to announce that an Israeli astronaut with a payload of Israeli instruments will fly on a space shuttle mission next year.
Hello, my name is Ilan Ramon, and I'm honored and privileged to be on this flight with this wonderful team.
For Ilan, for Israel, for Holocaust survivors, and for Jews worldwide, the symbolism was enormous. This ancient, miraculous people had once again risen from the ashes to not only survive, but thrive. Ilan felt compelled to represent all Jews by representing Judaism itself, and he did so by choosing to observe Shabbat.
And it was quite exciting to meet Ilan. I felt this immediate attachment because he went straight over to me and gave me a big hug.
Rabbi Zvi Konnikov is director of Chabad of the Space and Treasure Coasts and met Ilan while he was in training at Kennedy Space Center.
He said to me that he really wants to keep and mark Shabbat in the shuttle, and he wanted me to tell him when would be Shabbat for the 3 weeks that he would be in space. What exact time? When would he keep the Shabbat? His question was, if every 90 minutes is another sunset, so basically another day, and every 10 and a half hours is technically Shabbat, and really every 20 days is Rosh Hashanah, if you get where I'm going. I sent letters to Rabbanim, chief rabbis throughout the world. They've said that he should set his watch in accordance with the local Cape Canaveral time, and that's how he should keep Shabbat.
In addition to observing Shabbat, Ilan would also take a Torah that survived the German concentration camps into space. After months of training and a lengthy delay, Ilan and his 6 fellow crew members launched aboard Space Shuttle Columbia.
Start. 3, 2, 1. We have booster ignition and liftoff of Space Shuttle Columbia with a multitude of national and international space research experiments.
10 days later, while Jews around the globe were reciting the Friday night Kiddush, thanking God for his eternal day of rest, Ilan did the same many miles off the planet.
I'll never forget that day, that morning, February 1st, when I was walking with my daughter. We were walking to shul, walking to the Chabad Center, and I knew that the shuttle was supposed to land exactly 9:16. We didn't hear the sonic boom, which is always something you hear, and it's a tremendous blast, even louder than the actual launch.
Columbia, Houston, UHF comm check.
This day has brought terrible news and great sadness to our country. At 9 o'clock this morning, Mission Control in Houston lost contact with our Space Shuttle Columbia. A short time later, debris was seen falling from the skies above Texas. The Columbia is lost. There are no survivors.
But Ilan taught us a powerful message. No matter how fast we're going, no matter how important our work, we need to pause and think about why we're here on Earth. Truthfully, when you think about it, it really is the legacy of Ilan, what he taught us about Shabbat.
Miraculously, defying rational explanation, fragile pages of Ramon's personal onboard diary survived. Despite the extreme heat of the explosion, the extreme atmospheric cold at 37 miles above the Earth, and weeks of rain, mud, and insects on the ground, Ilan's words remained readable. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy, he wrote. A handwritten copy of the Friday night Kiddush prayer was Ilan's final message to the world.
So that's not so easy to watch. I've obviously watched it before as I was preparing what I would be showing in this class, and every time I see it, it doesn't get any easier. A terrible tragedy, I'm sure you remember. And of course, the message that the rabbi shared about what Ilan taught or displayed really with his example, that no matter how important what you're involved in, it's always important to stop and remember the creator, remember that there's a purpose in this world, and try and reevaluate and gain new strength to continue forward in our part of the mission. I also want to focus though on the fact that Ilan was up there in space, which obviously he was there with the crew, but even if you're there with I don't know, 10 people, must be quite a lonely experience being a human being in outer space. And especially him being there representing the Jewish people, a Jew alone, marking and celebrating the Shabbat. But he accomplished something extremely powerful by doing that without any other people there doing it along with him. So while being alone has its challenges, and there are many, and of course there are many reasons why we also need to be with others and connect and share, there is also a great power in what we can do on our own, alone, whether it's by ourselves completely or with one or two or three or more other people that we are confined or isolated with for a specific period of time. And it's often over there that we can really find God in a way that we couldn't find him otherwise. Because we look at things in a different way and we can encounter him in a different way because we're looking at things more deeply and we're looking at things in a completely different way than we ever have before. So we're going to hope and pray that we don't have to be restricted in this way for too much longer. But in the meantime, we can still take this chance and this opportunity that God is giving us to look inside ourselves, to take those few moments with ourselves, together with God, together with those in our immediate household. And we can be surprised by the power of what we're able to achieve in that way. I'm going